Hey everybody, Arnaldo here broadcasting from Fidelios Frequency. Welcome to my channel. Today we will be talking about the amazing voice and talent of Aretha Franklin as featured in the new box set, A Portrait of the Queen, 1970 through 1974. We'll be taking a look at both the vinyl box set as well as the CD box set. First, we'll do a quick unboxing to show you the contents of each one of them, and then we'll be back right after to talk more in depth about each one of them. Aretha Franklin, A Portrait of the Queen, 1970 through 1974, collects the studio recordings of Aretha Franklin during this time period, with the exception of one, which was released in November of 1974, and that is With Everything I Feel in Me, not included in this box set. I'd also like to mention that during this time period, Aretha Franklin released two fantastic live albums. The first one in 1971, live at the Fillmore West, and in 1972 she released a live gospel album, Amazing Grace. Before we get into talking about the first two albums of this box set, both released in 1970, I'd like to give you a brief overview of Aretha's career up until then. Aretha was originally signed to Columbia Records, and on that label she released 9 albums. To not much commercial success nor critical attention, possibly because the A&R department was unable to identify the proper repertoire for Aretha Franklin. Maybe the production drowned Aretha's vocals and voice within an orchestra, or maybe the marketing department was unable to identify the target audience for Aretha's recordings. All of that changed in 1967 when she signed to Atlantic Records, and under the guidance, the supervision, and production of Jerry Wexler, she released her first album on Atlantic Records, I've Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. That is one of my personal favorites of Aretha Franklin. 1968 saw the release of Lady Soul and Aretha Now. All three of these albums, huge commercial hits. They were all certified gold. So that goes to show that Aretha Franklin was on the right path. 1969 saw the release of Soul 69, and that brings us finally to 1970, which saw the release of the first two albums in this box set. The first one is This Girl's in Love with You, and the second one, Spirit in the Dark. Two very, I want to say, different albums in terms of conception. The first one is mostly a compilation or tracks assembled by Jerry Wexler, compiled by Jerry Wexler, from recordings that Aretha had done at different times up until then and at different studios. Mostly backed by the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. And it features mostly cover versions, with the exception of one song, which is an Aretha original called Call Me. Now, when we're talking about cover versions, this is not karaoke. This is Aretha Franklin. One of her many talents is interpreting and reinterpreting songs of others. Aretha, apart from her amazing vocal talent, I believe she had an 8.5 octave range. Aretha's gift was to be able to make these songs her own, her storytelling, and reinterpret the songs, give them sometimes a new meaning. And a notable example of totally revamping a song is Otis Redding's Respect, which Aretha has cut the definitive version of Respect. And she gave it a totally different meaning and a fantastic new arrangement that is so different from the original. That's one of Aretha Franklin's many talents. The covers on this song start from Son of a Preacher Man, which was a Dusty Springfield hit. The title track, This Girl's in Love with You, I believe was sung by Dionne Warwick, and it is a Bacharach and David song. Then we have, I'm just citing a few of them, two Beatles songs, Eleanor Rigby and Let It Be. Now, it's rumored that Paul McCartney wrote Let It Be with Aretha Franklin in mind. Apparently, there was a demo that was sent to Jerry Wexler, and initially Aretha Franklin was reluctant to record it, but did finally cut a version of the song in October of 1969. And when this album was released in January of 1970, it was the first commercial release of Let It Be. Yes, that's before the Beatles. The Beatles version only came out in March, a few months later, of 1970. So, one final thing, Sit Down and Cry is the last song on the album, was swapped out at the last minute instead of a cover version of The Fool on the Hill, another Beatles track, which we'll talk about later in this video. Moving on to the second album of 1970, and that is Spirit in the Dark. This almost is like a concept album. It was recorded in a very short time period, and with the intention of all the songs fitting onto one album. This has probably the most of all the self-penned Aretha tracks. I believe there's 5 on here, starting from Pullin', You and Me, the title track Spirit in the Dark, which Aretha's had been asked several times what the song is about, and she always evaded the question and rather not talk about it. That it was a very, very personal meaning and subject matter for her. She's always said that when she writes a song, she wrote from either a personal experience or experiences of people that she knows. So still a mysterious lyric, that of Spirit in the Dark. And then to continue, Try Maddie's and One Way Ticket are the other Aretha Franklin originals. Why I Sing the Blues also is a cover version by written by B.B. King. Backing band, we have two backing bands because they were recorded two different studios, I believe in Miami and in New York. We have Muscle Shoals again, and then we have also the Dixie Flyers supported Aretha on this album, on some of the tracks of this album. Then we move on to 1972, which saw the release of Young, Gifted, and Black, which is probably the crown jewel of this box set. Critically acclaimed, shift in musical direction for Aretha Franklin in the sense that there are no Muscle Shoals, I believe, on this album, but instead her backing band is an array of stellar musicians, starting from her label mate, genius, amazing vocalist Donny Hathaway, who plays piano and organ on this album, Chuck Rainey on bass, Bernard Purdy on drums, backing vocals by Aretha's sisters, and I believe on Rocksteady there is also a feature of Dr. John. And the songs of this album. 4 original Aretha songs, and they're fantastic. We have Daydreaming, Rocksteady, and All the King's Horses, and First Snow in Kokomo. But the cover versions featured on here are also stellar, starting with Oh Me Oh My, the title track written by Nina Simone, Young, Gifted, and Black, and the Delphonics' Didn't I Blow Your Mind? I don't know, it's like I'm reading the entire track listing. Her reading of The Long and Winding Road is amazing. I think better than the Beatles version. And finally, the definitive version of Elton John's border song, parentheses, Holy Moses. So fantastic album, this one, probably the crown jewel of this box set. And that brings us to 1973, when Aretha releases Hey Now Hey, The Other Side of the Sky. You can see it upside down as well. Up until 1973, Aretha Franklin's albums were mostly produced by Jerry Wexler, Tom Dowd, and sometimes also with the inclusion of Arif Martin. Aretha, for this album, decided that she wanted to do something different. She originally wanted to do a proper jazz album and enlisted Quincy Jones to produce it. This is one of the albums that took Aretha the longest to record. It was recorded over the span of well over a year. And halfway through the project, there was a slight change of mind. There's more of a pop and soul influence in here, as well as jazzy. But nonetheless, this represents probably one of Aretha's most musically adventurous albums and creative albums. It has 3 originals, Aretha originals. The first one, So Swell When You're Well, Sister from Texas, and the title track, Hey Now Hey. A little unclear what the main backing band is, except for a couple of notable solos that are actually mentioned in the credits. One of them being, and we'll talk about the second track of the album, which is Somewhere from West Side Story, where in addition to Phil Woods providing a alto sax solo, Aretha provides an amazing jazz-influenced piano solo. And here's when we talk about how underrated Aretha Franklin's I don't think at this point it's underrated anymore because so many people have name-checked her as an amazing pianist, underrated pianist. Elton John, Keith Richards actually said that when Aretha wanted to record Jumping Jack Flash and asked Keith Richards to feature, this was in the 80s, to feature on guitar, he said, I'll play on it if you're playing piano. So an example of her amazing piano playing is on the song Somewhere. And one other, there's a lot of beautiful songs on here, but there's a 7-minute version of Bobby Womack's That's the Way I Feel About You. And now that brings us to 1974 and the last studio album featured in the vinyl box set, Let Me In Your Life, with its beautiful cover, beautiful portrait of Aretha Franklin. This album doesn't get talked about enough, and along with 2 other albums in the box set, Hey Now and This Girl's in Love With You, I'm pretty sure have not been re-released or reissued on vinyl since the 70s, so another reason to get this box set. Let Me In Your Life is an album where Aretha goes back to what she was doing earlier on in her career, where she was singing at the same time with the entire band present. The strings, the horn section, the rhythm section, all in the same room with Aretha Franklin. And again, another stellar lineup of musicians, some of the same that we saw on Young, Gifted, and Black. So we have, once again, Bernard Purdie on drums, Donny Hathaway on the keyboards, Chuck Rainey on bass, Rick Marotta also on drums, Bob James on organ, Stanley Clarke also on bass, Deodato on piano and string arrangements. This album doesn't get as much attention as it should. Has 2 original tracks, Oh Baby and If You Don't Think, but it also has some other amazing covers. Until You Come Back to Me, that's what I'm gonna do, a Stevie Wonder song, and Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing by Ashford and Simpson, and finally, an amazing cover of Donny Hathaway hit, as well as the Leon Russell originally wrote A Song for You. Fantastic version also on this album. So that covers all of the studio albums, official studio albums included in this box set. And finally, the last album in the vinyl box set is Pledging My Love, session tracks. What a fantastic picture of Aretha Franklin in the front cover as well as the rear cover. Just beautiful, great selection, great choice for the artwork of the bonus album. There are 11 songs on here, a few alternate mixes, outtakes, demos. Some of the outtakes are from the Hey Now session. Hey Now session yielded 9 extra tracks featured amongst this release, and we'll tackle that in a minute. 3 of them are included in the vinyl version, and those are Sweetest Smile and Funkiest Style, Do You Know, and Master of Eyes. There is a beautiful version of, maybe not as iconic and definitive as Etta James's version, Aretha's version of At Last, and the alternate mix of Spanish Harlem, that is the mix before Arif Mardin added the string arrangement. And here's where I'll explain a little bit the differences with the CD box set. The CD box set is a 5 CD. We saw the vinyl has 5 albums plus 1 album, making it 6 of outtakes. The CD tacks on the extra tracks at the end of each album that they pertain to. There's a total of 27 extra tracks on the CD version and versus the 11 only on the vinyl version. Some of the tracks that were included, in addition to the 3 tracks from Hey Now, from the Hey Now sessions, There's another 6 tracks from those sessions on the CD version. I believe 8 of those tracks are tacked on at the back at the end of Hey Now. 1 spills over due to CD limitations onto the next album, Let Me In Your Life, and that is the cover version of Leonard Cohen's Suzanne. Other notable cover versions included in this one is, I mentioned earlier in the video, Fool on the Hill, a cover of the Beatles track, was bumped at the last minute from This Girl's in Love with You. It is featured on here, as well as Aretha's version of My Way, the Frank Sinatra hit, You Keep Me Hanging On, the Supremes hit, the amazing version of Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel, and the same version we saw on the vinyl version of Spanish Harlem, alternate mix without the strings. A few more credit mentions, I should say. The vinyl was mastered and cut from the original analog tapes by Chris Bellman at Bernie Grundman, and the CD was mastered by Michael Graves. There are 5 albums. I did not have a chance to compare each one of them, but I compared Young, Gifted, and Black, the vinyl versus the CD, and the CD seems to be a bit brighter, maybe at times crisper than the vinyl version, but I have to say there's a warmth to Aretha's voice on the vinyl version, and I tend to prefer the more organic soundstage on the vinyl version over the CD version. They both sound fantastic. If you choose the CD version, you can't go wrong, also because it has 27 extra tracks. Vinyl lovers will not be disappointed by the vinyl version. Pressed on 180 gram vinyl at GZ Media, flat, quiet, love it. Final thoughts for the team involved in the creation of this fantastic release. Patrick Milligan at Rhino, the BMG catalog team represented by Jeff Christian and Michael Kachko, production team, Brandon Weston, thank you for including those polyline sleeves. Liner notes, foreword by Gail Mitchell, track-by-track commentary by David Nathan, and above all, props to Cheryl Pawelski at Omnivore, who produced and curated this box set. Aretha Franklin is no longer physically with us, but her star still shines bright. And in this release, once again, we get to appreciate the talent and the voice of Aretha Franklin. Thank you for watching.